Tomb Raider is the latest video game adaptation based off of a popular video game or video game character. It stars Alicia Vikander as Lara Croft, aka the Tomb Raider, and it's directed by a guy named Roar. I think is his name. This guy. You can't tell me that when you see this guy, you don't think of a lion roaring. It's just, okay, maybe that's just me. Like I said, Tomb Raider is based off of the popular video game series Tomb Raider. There was a couple of new games that came out a few years ago. Before that, there were video games that came out in the 90s, and there were a couple of movies that came out in the early 2000s that starred Angelina Jolie as Tomb Raider, and this time around, we have Alicia Vikander, like I said, as Lara Croft. Lara Croft is a young woman who does mixed martial arts, and she's a bike courier, and her father disappeared a while ago, like 7 years ago, before the story that we see taking place. She is basically refusing to acknowledge her father's death. She won't sign off on his will or anything like that, but then one day when she decides to go sign the paperwork for it, she discovers a clue that leads to another clue that leads to a hint of where her father disappeared to. And her father apparently disappeared to some weird island off the coast of Japan, so she recruits a ship captain and she has to go find the answers, and that's Tomb Raider. I think I can speak for a lot of us when I say that most of the video game adaptations that come out are a pile of shit, or at least if they're not a pile of shit, they're just not that good. Even the Tomb Raider movies that came out in the early 2000s really weren't all that good. I mean, there's two reasons that people went to go see those movies. Angelina Jolie and her tits. There was the tits and there was the mouth. We all wanted to go see that because we wanted to see what it would be like to see Angelina Jolie eat a sandwich. And with that mouth, Angelina could probably suck a bag of them. But either way, the movies themselves weren't that good. And so this is kind of based off of the newer games. And I've played the newer games, and the newer games are kind of fun to play. So the big question this time around is, does it live up to those games? Is it a faithful adaptation of those games? And I would say for the most part, yeah, it is. Everything in this movie begins and ends with Alicia Vikander as Lara Croft. As far as the character that they're trying to nail from those games, and as far as the character she's portraying in this movie, she crushed it. She killed it. She carried the entire movie. In this movie, she's able to blend both parts of Lara Croft together, and that is the badass adventurer as well as the vulnerable human side of her. I'll also say that Alicia Vikander impressed the hell out of me in the stunts in this movie. As far as the action scenes go, she takes a beating in this movie. I mean, not only does she physically get beaten at different points, but she's jumping off of rocks and slamming into boulders and falling through trees and jumping off of airplanes, and pretty much all the stunts and the weird shit that you would see in the video games, Alicia Vikander's doing in this movie. And I would say that, again, as far as faithful adaptations go, it looks just like the video game. A lot of the same traps and weird cliff falling scenarios that you see in the video game, you see in this movie, and Alicia Vikander is the one thing that sells you, the one thing that holds it all together. As a result, whenever Alicia Vikander as Lara Croft is doing her thing, you're invested and you're excited. There are some fun-ish action sequences, a lot of which defy gravity and defy common sense. Let's just be honest, most of the time people try to do stuff that they do in the video game or in the movie, they end up dead. But again, it is a video game adaptation, and you have to try to suspend some of your disbelief at the door. Again, without a saleswoman as good as Alicia Vikander to sell it, the movie doesn't really work. So I really can't praise her enough. She sets a solid foundation for Lara Croft to continue with new stories in the future. Having said that, everything surrounding Lara Croft and the action in this movie is kind of bleh. I can tell you it's about the storytelling involved, like how they rely on a whole bunch of boring exposition, because, you know, we need endless scenes of people trying to explain the backstory of every tree branch from this island that her father disappeared to. But even that's not as big an issue as the story itself. The story itself, it's kind of dumb, honestly. There are things that happen in this movie where not only is there not enough explanation given to them to justify why the story turned out that way in the movie, but then there's just certain things where you just, from a mental perspective, even accepting the fact that this is a video game adaptation, you go, no, that was just stupid. That doesn't make sense. So because the story really isn't that good, and the execution of the story with exposition or a lack of explanation is a thing in the movie, you find yourself getting bored for a lot of the parts on the island because you're not invested in anything outside of Lara Croft kicking ass. And that applies to the rest of the characters too. The other characters in the movie are kind of cookie cutter and generic, and you don't really give a shit about them. I love Daniel Wu. Daniel Wu is Sunny. Sunny is one of the most badass characters on TV right now with Into the Badlands, but I have no idea idea why he was even in this movie. Could have replaced Daniel Wu in this movie with anybody. The movie would be no different. Also, unfortunately, applies to the villain. The villain is played by Walter Goggins, I think is his name, and he's an actor I've always respected. He's in a lot of Quentin Tarantino movies, and this guy has a very diversified portfolio. But in this movie, he's one-dimensional. He's one note, and he's kind of a bore. Because the villain is bland, and because the characters are bland, and because the story is bland and stupid, there's really no reason to be emotionally invested in anything going on besides Lara Croft and besides the action scenes. So in that sense, it's a dumb, entertaining, turn your brain off kind of action thriller that you can enjoy. So I can barely recommend this movie, but not highly. I'm going to put it on the low end of Man of Steel in the golden age. Alright, so Tomb Raider, tell me, what was your favorite Tomb Raider movie of the two ones that came out back in the early 2000s? And if you've seen this new Tomb Raider, how do you think Alicia Vikander stacks up against Angelina Jolie from back in the day? Please comment below and let me know. Like and subscribe to the Superfan Show. And as always, if you like what you see, tell me how you feel and stay tuned to hear more from the Man of Steel.